Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third Coalition for Just Hamilton County Political Forum, the third forum of this season and the final forum. Thank God for that. It's good to have all of you here this evening. Tonight will have three candidates that will join us. State Senator David Dallas, who has not yet appeared, State Representative, or she's running for State Representative Rachel Baker, and finally current State Representative Jessica Miranda, who are here. It will proceed as follows. Each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves, followed by a question and answer period of which they will have 2 minutes to answer each question. At the end, they will have 1 minute to conclude and to appeal to the voters for their votes. Again, this forum is being sponsored this evening by the Coalition for Just Hamilton County. I'm the host tonight, or the moderator rather, Tracy Hunter. I am joined in co-moderation by Jenny Brown, as well as Barbara Wolf. For those who are in the listening audience, first of all, we want to encourage everyone to please go to your Facebook pages. You can go to a Coalition for Just Hamilton County and share the live video with your viewing audience. You can again go to the Coalition for Just Hamilton County Facebook page. I believe we're streaming on multiple forums, live stream as well as Facebook. And this recording will be available through the election cycle. So even those that may not have joined early, they will be watching the repeats or the record of this particular forum tonight. So with that, again, thanks so much everyone for joining us. I want to thank our candidates. Oh, Carmia will be handling the time this evening. She's timekeeper. When we start the question portion, you will have 2 minutes. You will see a 1 minute warning, a 30-second warning, a 15-second warning, followed by a stop. And I do request that you please stop when you are asked to stop, because we want everyone to have an equal amount of time here this evening. Any questions from the candidates before we get started? Or the parameters pretty clear? Okay, thank you again. And so again, our co-moderators, Jenny Brown, Barbara Wolf. I will start off the forum, first of all, just asking each of you to introduce yourselves. And we'll start with you. We'll start with State Rep Jessica Miranda. If you will just introduce yourself this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Hunter. My name is State Representative Jessica Miranda. I am the state representative for Ohio's District 28, or as I like to call it, the Great 28, which spans the northern suburbs, centralized here at the top of our county, here in Hamilton County. So roughly, it goes from my city where I live in Forest Park all the way over to Montgomery and dips down to the south a bit and picks up Madeira, Reading, Deer Park, Evendale, Glendale, and Green Hills. So I have all the dales and all of the amazing northern suburbs of Hamilton County, or I should say most of them. So I was first elected in 2018. We flipped this seat from red to blue by 56 votes. So please don't ever let anyone tell you that your vote does not matter, because it matters greatly, and it matters especially in these local elections, especially the ones for State House and State Senate. I have served, this is now my second term. I'm in my fourth year, excuse me, you lose all track of time in Columbus. And I have now been promoted by my colleagues in the Democratic caucus to serve them as the Democratic whip. So I'm very happy to do that, very happy for the leadership role I have earned and gained in the State House. I am also a mother of 3 beautiful daughters, a business owner, and a former school board president for the Winton Woods City School District, who I might add a little plug. They are the Division II state football champions, and we are on our way to defending our title this year. So
okay, I'm going to stop you right there.
Having me.
Thank you. All right. They only have 1 minute for the introduction, Karamia. So just give the stop after the 1 minute on this. Thanks. All right. Rachel Baker, good evening.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm honored to be here with Representative Miranda, who's kind of my mentor in this process, as I've seen her flip a red seat blue. So I am running for state rep in House District 27, which is the east side of Cincinnati. It goes from Loveland, Sims Township, Indian Hill, Terrace Park, Anderson, Newtown, and then goes into the city with Mount Lookout, Hyde Park, Avondale, Evanston, and Walnut Hills. So my history, I am a mom of three and a nurse. I also have my PhD in nursing research and direct a nursing research program in the city, and really got called as I've seen lots of extremism happening at my local school board and lots of extremism coming out of the State House. I really felt drawn to serve in this way. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Jenny, we'll allow you to start the questions, and if you want to start with Rachel Baker, and then we'll go to you, Barbara Wolf, and then you will ask the next question of Representative Miranda, and then I will follow up with the third question, and we'll go in that order. Jenny Brown.
Hi, Ms. Baker.
Hi.
What are the roles and responsibilities of the office that you seek?
Good question. And this is a question that I've been talking with lots of people about. What's been really exciting about my campaign is the number of new people that have got engaged in the political process. I've talked to so many voters who said, I always vote for president, but that's all I know and that's all I do. And I think that might be how we've gotten here. So we've been doing lots of education. State representatives are propose, vote on legislation and state bills. They oversee the state budget and really should be in close contact with their constituents in their district to make sure that the issues and the priorities that are most important to their constituents are being taken to the State House and being incorporated and addressed by the House.
Thank you.
Ms. Wolf, second question.
Yes, I'm State Representative Jessica Miranda. What specific improvements or changes have you made for your constituents while state representative over the past several terms in office?
Thank you. I was hesitating to get off mute there for a second because my dog's barking in the background. Someone must be at the door. So some of the things that we have been able to do, again, as your super minority party, I think we always have to keep in context that the State House is very, very gerrymandered, which means it's very, very lopsided in terms of the partisan makeup. We only have 35 Democrats out of 99 seats, so that puts us in the super minority. We have a huge barrier in following and passing the kind of legislation that we know matters to us and our families and working people across the state. But I am happy to report that even though I'm in one of the most competitive seats in the State House, I have passed 2 bills this year. One has to do with allocating better mental health services and putting better resources around our school counselors so that they can do their job and do their job well. And then the second is called the Testing Your Faith Act, which makes sure that we have the same accommodations for all religious beliefs and backgrounds in higher education.
Thank you. This next question goes to Rachel Baker. What have you done that qualifies you for the office that you seek as state representative?
Good question. So I think one thing that I think really qualifies me is that I live in my community. I've been here for 21 years. I'm very engaged in my community. My kids are involved in all the activities. We volunteer for everything. So we are a part of our community. And I really think that it's important that our representatives represent the people and know the people and can represent them. In addition to that, like I said, I direct a nursing research program. And in that role, I work with lots of people with different priorities and sometimes conflicting priorities and help us all kind of reach a common goal, work together to kind of back down from some of the emotion and be able to see what is what do we all want to achieve, and how do we come together, and how do we bring together different points of view to move forward on things. And so I would bring that same leadership leadership quality.
Thank you. Jenny Brown.
Yes, State Representative Miranda. I know you kind of answered this in your last question, but the question is, what legislation have you sponsored that's been passed? If you can go a little bit more in depth.
Sure. So I will not talk about the two that I've already mentioned, and I'll just talk about some other important things that we need to, address in the State House, right? One, Rachel has already said, which is this rise of extremism. This has been a nightmare for us in the State House. It has prevented us from getting done the very crucial and critical things that need to be done for families across the state. And as you can see, ever since the Dobbs decision came down from the federal government, and even before then, there were massive extremist bills on the books and introduced in the Ohio State House that aims to take not only women and pregnant people's rights away to their reproductive freedom, but it aims to take away our voting rights. It aims to take away, equality in the way we educate our children. And these are the things that Democrats are fighting against every single day in the State House. And one of the things I wanted to focus on, which hopefully has been talked about in previous forums with other candidates, is the fair school funding plan. This is very, very important because our school funding system here in the state of Ohio has been deemed unconstitutional since before I was born, since 1984. This matters to us because it matters to us who are paying the property taxes, but it also matters because we want to make sure all of our children, no matter what their zip code, has a quality education. And so this is something we need to make sure that we are paying attention to, and that we renew and fully fund next General Assembly.
Thank you. And just before Barb asks the next question, Kermie, I just want to clarify the timing again. They have 2 minutes to answer the question. And so you don't put up the 1 minute until after the first minute passes, okay? So they have 2 minutes. So after 1 minute, put up the 1 minute sign. Then, okay, got it.
I got it.
Okay.
I do apologize.
It's okay.
I'm cutting them short. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I just wanted to bring clarity. Thank you. All right. I tried to call you off air, but obviously in the middle of the form, you didn't answer the phone. So sorry about that, everyone. But I don't want to cut short our candidates.
Okay.
All right.
Rachel,
go ahead.
Rachel Baker, what are the top 3 priorities you plan to address if elected?
So this is a really good question. But first, I want to point out that Representative Miranda just said she wasn't born in 1984. I need to highlight that. I feel very old right now. Okay. So my 3 issues, and this is kind of what I think as I've started canvassing, I really realized that I'm the right person to represent this community, because as I go door to door, the issues that people are bringing up to me are almost, I'd say every single time, the top issues for me, the issues that keep me up at night. I would say that those are reproductive freedom, keeping healthcare decisions between providers and patients. Being a nurse, I know the nuances and the things that go into these kind of decisions, and it's crazy to think we could have a black and white rule that would incorporate everybody's personal experiences. So that is a huge one since Dobbs. And then I would say the public education. My district consists of Forest Hills School District, which if you've seen the news recently, we've been having lots of kind of extreme stuff going on in our school district. And so lots of people are mentioning that, and kind of, with adding back trust to teachers, and seeing teachers as the professionals and experts in education. And then gun safety legislation, I'd say, is the third one that comes up a lot. And just looking at, most Ohioans want some sort of common sense gun legislation. However, a great example of the extremism in the state house and with our governor, our laws are making it easier to own guns.
Thank you. This next question goes to State Representative Jessica Miranda. And that question is, what is your position on the current gun law that was passed by the Senate and signed by Governor Dewine that allows for any school employee to carry guns within the school if their school district allows it? And if you disagree with it, what can you, if anything, do about it?
Yes, thank you for that question. And again, I agree with Rachel that this is one, I would say this is the, fourth. We have 4 huge issues here in Ohio right now that voters at the door are talking to us about. And this is certainly one of those that is of utmost importance. And, House Bill 99 is not the only horrid and heinous law that my super majority colleagues have passed this General Assembly. They've passed 2 other ones that are equally as horrible, which is the permitless carry and the shoot first, ask questions later bill that they also passed into law, and Governor DeWine signed them. These are horrible bills that do nothing but make our communities more dangerous and introduce more weapons onto our streets. And certainly this one, here in my House district, we had a scare the other day with Princeton schools, and apparently this was part of a nationwide hoax of saying there was an active shooter in the building, and my heart just dropped. And I'm here to tell you that the solution to active shooters in our school buildings that are aiming to harm our kids is not, the solution is not arming teachers and putting more guns in school buildings. That's the farthest from the solution, if you ask me. So not only was I against this bill, our entire caucus was against this bill. We voted against this bill. We fought the good fight. We stood with our law enforcement officers and other first responders who were also against this bill. So the Republican supermajority in Columbus, in your state capital, stood against our partners in law enforcement on this one, and they stood against our educators and our parents across the entire state. And for that, they should be held accountable. But unfortunately, until we do something about gerrymandering and bring fair maps to Ohio, they will never be held accountable. So again, this is a huge reason why myself and Senator Cecil Thomas started the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus, the first of its kind in the state of Ohio, because we want to start changing the conversation of gun safety laws here in the state of Ohio. And we have introduced a smorgasbord of common sense legislation that has gone absolutely nowhere and hasn't received any hearings because of the Republican supermajority in the state house.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. The question is similar. You kind of already touched on it. So if you can just go into more detail on this question a little bit. What is your position on the current gun law passed by the Senate and signed by Governor DeWine that allows citizens to carry guns without a concealed carry permit and without doing a background check?
Yes, I am completely opposed to both of these. Kind of going back to the question about what I bring to this seat. What I do all day at work is take evidence, data, and facts and boil them down to making decisions and then evaluating how those decisions work. So I do this in really difficult healthcare situations, and this is the framework that I would approach these kind of things. I would want to look at data and facts about how to decrease gun violence, and I think we know that permitless carry and decreasing the requirements to purchase and own a weapon make no sense. But I would definitely want to show that, and then show data after changes and how bills, impact public safety. So I would definitely stand on the side of making our community safer. And I don't think less guns and less restrictions around guns are the way to do that for our community and for our law enforcement officers.
Thank you.
This is for State Representative Jessica Miranda. What is your stance on Roe v. Wade, and what have you done at the state level to impact reproductive rights for women?
Thank you for that question. I absolutely supported the constitutional protections that we had in the U.S. Constitution, which was Roe v. Wade. Unfortunately, that has been overturned with the Dobbs decision, and we are now in a place in our country where 150 years worth of work has been dismantled by a extremist Supreme Court. So I have introduced House Joint Resolution 5, which is called the Ohio Reproductive Freedom Act. It's modeled after the Reproductive Freedom Act that's currently on the ballot in the state of Michigan this year. And this is to codify in Ohio's Constitution women and pregnant people's rights to make their own decisions about their reproductive health. As we know, unfortunately, this Dobbs decision has been rolled out. Women have lost their lives. Children have had to flee our own state and go to across state borders to get abortions for, because they don't want to carry their rapist baby and their children. So as a survivor of sexual abuse and rape myself, once we saw that leaked memo that came out about what we foresaw was coming with this Dobbs decision, we got to work right away. And my female colleagues and I in the Ohio State House put together the joint resolution so that we can do what the state of Kansas has done when they spoke and codified reproductive rights in their state constitution. So we are hoping to get this moved along. And if we can't get it moved along because of the extremists and the gerrymandering we have in the state, then we're hoping an outside organization will pick this up and get it on our ballot here in Ohio, because we cannot afford another day to go by, another girl, women, or pregnant person's lives being lost because of our archaic laws and our horrible 6-week abortion ban here in Ohio.
Thank you. And just a reminder to those who are in our listening audience, whether on Facebook or also on Zoom, if you have a question and we have time to pose it, and we may have time because our third candidate, David Dallas, has failed to appear as of tonight, and the time was equally divided between these three candidates. So if you have questions that you would like to also pose to our candidates tonight, Jessica Miranda or Rachel Baker, we invite you to either write it in the chat or also write it on Facebook. And if we have time, and we might just have time, we'll get to your question. Also, I just want to remind everybody, please share the video, your Facebook live feed of this, so that other people can get exposed to the candidates here tonight. Next question for you, and it's actually the same question because this is such an important question, Rachel Baker, and that question is the same, and that is, what is your position on the reversal of Roe v. Wade, and how do you particularly feel about women's reproductive rights and whether or not they're being protected in the state of Ohio? And at that, what do you feel about the possible disparate outcome between all of the different states that can basically formulate their own legislation regarding women's reproductive rights, abortion rights, etc.?
Yes, I absolutely support that these decisions are made between patients and their healthcare providers. Obviously, I think that it should be supported at the federal level, but since it's been moved to the state house, I mean, this absolutely shows us why it's so important this election, particularly, to get out and vote for local elections, to make sure that people know who's running locally for their state rep seats. Because, if things that the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas in particular, said, if they are looking at other rights that they're going to start peeling off of the 14th Amendment, those are going to come to the state to decide. And so who we have in the state house is going to be critical in the next few years, I think. But I absolutely would support codifying Roe in Ohio's Constitution. I would support Representative Miranda and the caucus for sure in this. I think, we hear stories of patients going outside of Ohio to get healthcare, which just seems ridiculous. But the other thing to think is that that the people who are doing that have the resources and ability to do that. And so we're creating this disparity where some people are going to have resources to travel, and if the distance gets further and further and further, how many people are able to fly to New York or to California because they need healthcare. I think we're going to see healthcare disparities based on socioeconomic status, based on accessibility, and we're going to see maternal mortality rates that are really, really going to cause a major problem.
Thank you. Oh, she's still talking. Her mouth is moving, but I can't see.
She's done.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, I was looking at another feed and it was on a different time loop. All right. Thank you.
Representative Miranda, what is your position on issue 1 that Joe Dieters has proposed regarding bails? Can you explain the legislation, and do you agree with it? Why or why not?
Yes, so thank you for that question. I think issue 1, unfortunately, is, just another most current red herring or dog whistle to try to get certain folks to the polls to place their vote. The problem is cash bail is the illusion of public safety. So, issue 1 we had basically a bipartisan solution, which is House Bill 315 in the State House, a bill that was worked on very, very hard by a Democrat and a Republican that would give a better answer and better guidance to our judicial leaders to set bail or not in their courtroom. And unfortunately, the Republican supermajority in the State House completely ignored that bipartisan piece of legislation and decided to put this resolution in front of us to pass it and turn it into issue 1 on your November ballot. Again, I've said I do not agree with this. I do not believe, supporting issue 1 makes you quote unquote tough on crime. If my colleagues across the aisle were tough on crime, they would pass my bill, House Bill 266, which repeals the statute of limitations and allows children who are victims and survivors of child abuse and people who are survivors of rape to bring civil cases against their abusers, against pedophiles and rapists. So I again say, if my colleagues across the aisle really want to consider themselves tough on crime, they would pass things like House Bill 266 to protect our children under our laws more so than predators and pedophiles. And that's where I stand on that issue. And, unfortunately, they're going to throw millions and millions of dollars behind that ballot issue. And we just have to read it very, very carefully and know the difference, because even if someone is out on cash bail, they can still commit the same crimes of which they ended up in court for in the first place. And if you recall, there was a Walmart shooter who unfortunately shot and killed the Walmart greeter over in Butler County, just a little ways away from us. That person was out on cash bail. So again, it's the illusion of public safety. And we as House Democrats are here to fight for policies that we know matter to people, not ones that are just red herrings or dog whistles.
Awesome, thank you.
Is it my turn? Yeah. Rachel, let's see. Oh, here we go. What is your position on the health disparities that exist in the Black, brown, and underserved communities? And what do you represent? And what will you do to represent those people and help end those disparities?
For me, this is a passion of mine. When I completed my dissertation in nursing research, my study looked at the sexual assault nurse examiner exam that's done in the emergency room after a person has survived a sexual assault. And really interesting, some of the solutions that we use and put it on skin, it highlights injuries. And so we would put it on skin, highlight injuries, and then document that, and that goes to court. And injuries don't mean that something happened, but in court they definitely help the sentences. Well, the dye that we put on is a really dark blue. So on someone super pale like me, it sparks right up and you see all these things that look like horrible injuries. Whereas on someone with really dark skin, it's much harder to see. Um, and we saw a direct relationship between our nurse examiner technique and the pigment of people's skin. And that would actually result in differences for healthcare they received in the emergency room, but also differences in court outcomes for those women. So, you know, looking at everything we do and looking at it through a lens of if it's the right care for everyone and if it's being given in a just way and a fair way to all patients is absolutely something that I would want to focus on and that I've focused on kind of in my career and in the research that I do.
Thank you. This next question is for you, Representative Miranda, and that is, what have you done? You've been in office, you've stated several terms already. So what can you specifically point to that you have done to reduce health disparities in the Black, brown, and underserved communities in your district that you serve, but you know, overall to help everybody?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for this question. I want to echo a few things that Rachel said, but also point out that in the Ohio House Democratic Caucus in your state house, we have the Black Maternal Health Caucus, of which a number of my colleagues in the Democratic Caucus started, and sit on it. And they have introduced amazing bills such as the Save Our Mothers Act, the access to doulas, and a myriad of things that I have supported. Unfortunately, and again, I know I sound like a broken record, but those very, very good critical pieces of legislation do not see the light of day and do not get the proper committee process or the proper legislative process because of the unbalanced partisan makeup of which we find ourselves in the Ohio State Capitol. So I support all of those pieces of legislation, of course, and hands down. I first of all think that the first step in realizing the disparities in healthcare is to realize that we do have a problem, first and foremost, because unfortunately my colleagues across the aisle don't believe we do. And then once you have identified and actually know that we have a problem, you make pieces of legislation policy to address that. Ohio House Democrats have introduced a ton of pieces of legislation that would address this, especially in the space of maternal morbidity and mortality. Unfortunately, they go nowhere, just like our common sense gun safety bills, because the folks that we are dealing with across the aisle do not believe in the same kinds of policy, nor do they have the same kinds of values that we do. So I'll just leave it at that. But again, the Reproductive Healthcare Freedom Act would put the power back in your hands as Ohioans, because we do not want big government telling us what we can and cannot do with our reproductive health, especially when our lives are at stake.
Thank you.
Awesome. Ms. Baker, what is your position on affordable housing and how will you address the housing shortage in Cincinnati?
Thanks. Yeah, I think we definitely have to look at that. We need to, sorry, my phone's clicking off on me. We need to make sure that, you know, that we are supporting working people, working families, that people can have a good job and own a home, be able to pay their bills and live a good life. I mean, I think that we need to look at the way that, you know, money is going into the hands of corporate greed and not coming back to Ohioans. So I would definitely be in support of looking at fair housing, looking at legislation around fair housing, and making sure that we're supporting working people and Ohioans in our districts. I really want to go and represent the people and the issues and the needs in my district, and not kind of these big corporate needs.
Thank you.
Unmute yourself, Ms. Wolf.
Thank you. State Representative Jessica Miranda, what have you done about the housing crisis in Cincinnati?
So I just want to clarify that I don't have any part of the city of Cincinnati in my district, but I can speak to this a little bit in terms of the ARPA federal dollars that we still have sitting in the State House. We have a little over $1 billion still left to allocate to causes that we see most fit, and of course, causes that are of utmost importance at this point in time. And affordable housing surely is one, because if any of you are like me and we're looking at the prices of homes, either in your neighborhood or in neighboring communities, it has actually skyrocketed. It's through the roof. In fact, when they first did the first version of the maps where they drew me out of my own district, they took just my city, the city of Forest Park, and drew me out. I had to begin looking at homes in other areas of my district and quickly realized that there is no possible way that I'd be able to afford any of those homes in the market in any of the other 12 municipalities, which is what was left of my district. So long story short, this is a huge issue. It is a critical issue that we know exists. We have $1 billion sitting in the State House of federal monies from the Biden administration that we have to put to good use. And the last I heard, my Republican colleagues, the supermajority colleagues of mine across the aisle, are planning to keep their hands on that and hold it for a long period of time, when we should be putting that to good use during lame duck session after we come back from the election. So that money could be coming back to our communities to help with this crisis. That money could be coming back to the pockets of Ohioans all across the state to help with various things, especially things like childcare, which we also know is through the roof for working people. And they have no intention of doing anything with it. So again, that is the problem in the Ohio State House, and that is why folks like myself and Rachel are running to continue having these common sense voices at the table.
Thank you. Rachel, this question, especially since you have never been a state representative before or held any political office that I'm aware, what are you going to do to make sure that you have your pulse on the community and the constituency that you serve? How are you going to make yourself available to them? And what are you going to do to ascertain the specific needs of your district and in order to make sure that they are being properly represented at the State House?
This is a really good question, and one I've been thinking about a lot because, like I said, I'm really, really involved with my township. But my district is the craziest drawn thing you've ever seen. So, you know, we have Loveland and Sims Township, and then I have Newtown, and then I have Hyde Park, and then I have Avondale, Evanston. I mean, there's just such a difference, and some of the middle areas are cut out. So I don't have Mount Washington or Marymount or these other areas. And so I think the first thing is that I'm conscious that there's lots of experiences in that district, that we're not all one suburban, my little area that I represent personally. So I think having the proactive, conscious realization that I need to be a good representative to everybody in my district, to all experiences in my district. I've been working to build relationships in the different communities and to kind of begin personal relationships with people, community leaders, and make sure that I have a good understanding from their point of view, that I'm going to events, talking with people, getting personal relationships with people, because I think it's going to take some time and some trust to for people to know that I'm here for the right reason, and that I'm here really to represent, to hear people's experience. I think the biggest thing for me is getting to hear from people, but then also believing them. So hearing their experience and believing what they tell me is true, even if it's not the reality I experience, and being able to represent that wide range of experiences.
Thank you.
State Representative Miranda, the question I have for you is, what have you done to increase contracts for Black and Brown entrepreneurs that often are excluded from state contracts?
Yes, so I'm very proud to say that I used to sit on the Economic and Workforce Development Committee. And then when I took my leadership position, I moved off of that one, but am still on the Insurance Committee. And we passed a Senate bill that was sponsored by Senator Sykes and Senator Schuring, I believe, was his co-sponsor, that basically does just that. It makes sure that all levels of government are increasing their contracts to minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and it was just a great piece of legislation to expand and make sure that that is happening, even all the way down to our local governments and municipalities. So, of course, I was happy to support that. I was happy to get that out of the committee that I used to serve on and support that, as well as all of the members of my caucus, and happy to see, that get through the House and the Senate, and hopefully, if it hasn't been already, signed by the governor. That way we can enact it into policy and get that working for us in our communities.
Okay, thank you. I'll take it from here. I'm going to start addressing some of the audience questions that we have. Ms. Baker, this question is for you. There's been a lot of discussion regarding climate change. Do you agree or disagree that global warming is real, and are you in support of legislation that addresses global warming in the state of Ohio?
I absolutely think it's real. I'm a scientist and believe in science. And I think this is a huge thing, and it kind of worries me that it doesn't come up as often in my discussions with people, because I fear that we're just getting used to it. And, there was a time when it came up a lot, and I don't hear it that often. But I think it's a huge concern that we need to be forward thinking and make sure that we are looking at climate change and making legislation and policies to address it. I'm glad you asked this also, because my opponent has been sending mailers saying she's for clean energy from natural gas companies. And so I think it's super important to get out what real clean energy is and to support bills that support real clean energy. So I would be a big champion for addressing climate change and believing the science around it.
Okay. Thank you. For you, Representative Miranda, can you address the issue of House Bill 6 in the state of Ohio, and whether or not you agree with it or disagree, or are you in favor of it or repeal? What is your position? And could you explain it?
Absolutely. So House Bill 6 was a corporate bailout to one of the energy companies here in the state of Ohio. It also bailed out an out-of-state coal plant located in Indiana. So in other words, your taxpayer dollars to the tune of almost 150 million, but it's costing us more every single day, are going out of state and to an energy corporation that essentially did not need a bailout. And there's plenty of news articles to back up that information. So I'll let you Google that for yourself. But in a nutshell, that's what House Bill 6 was. It has been the point and of the most historic amount of alleged political corruption, alleged bribery, and alleged racketeering here in the state of Ohio. And no, I did not vote for it. I did not vote for the speaker who got us into that mess and, is now being charged with the alleged racketeering and the alleged bribery. However, I am definitely a part of the group that is fighting against this and fighting for a full repeal of House Bill 6. We have repealed pieces of it. Unfortunately, it hasn't repealed the entire thing. And at the end of the day, this is not what Ohioans send us to the state house to do. This is not the kind of policy that we should be churning out in our state government, and certainly not the kind of policy that works for working Ohioans and those of us that need it most. So there are other things that we should be, tackling and dealing with, and other common sense policies we should be putting in place. And unfortunately, until we get fair maps, we're going to have a very hard time of doing that. But yes, against House Bill 6, and I do support, however, a full repeal of it.
Thank you. The next question for you, Rachel Baker, and that has to do with gerrymandering. You heard Representative Miranda say that she was actually voted out of her or written out of her district and was looking for housing. this is your first time. So maybe, I don't know how much you were impacted or not, but what is your feeling on gerrymandering? And is there anything that you think that you can do, if elected, to prohibit or to eliminate the disparate outcome regarding the process and how it's impacting the communities?
Yeah, so my district was redrawn a little bit, but I stayed in the same district, but actually held off a little bit on announcing my candidacy until I saw the maps, and could make sure that I would be a good representative for the district that it ended up being. Um, and just thinking about the whole redistricting process, the second primary that many of us went through, I was had a primary opponent, so went through that August primary, and the amount, I think what is it, like $25 million or something that we all paid for that, is just ridiculous. And it's all in an attempt to have the legislator or the elected officials drawing a map that basically is picking their voters versus the voters picking who's representing them. If we look at my map, I think that it's purposely drawn that some areas, votes aren't as impactful as others. And that's why I'm really hoping to run and be able to represent the full district as it's turned out. But ultimately, voters in Ohio voted for fair maps. And so the redistricting continues. I will definitely be a champion for fair maps so that, people are fairly represented and the government's working for us instead of, the other way around and being drawn for individuals in power.
Thank you. Representative Miranda, the Ohio Constitution still allows for some form of slavery for persons who are convicted of a crime and imprisoned. There have been several attempts to remove that slavery language from the Ohio Constitution, and those attempts have failed. Do you support the removing of that language from the Constitution, and are you willing to support it, or to take any progressive actions or efforts to protect citizens that could technically be deemed slaves?
So I absolutely support removing that language from the Ohio Constitution. This is, there's many pieces of archaic language that need to be removed from our Ohio Constitution. And then access to reproductive freedom needs to be added to our Ohio Constitution. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but this issue, absolutely, yes, 1000%, I would support that. And again, that is the glaring importance of electing people who will fight for fair maps this November, because we have an opportunity to pick up seats this November. And if we as Democrats can get out of the super minority, we can actually start tackling these important policy changes and get them to the governor's desk for signature, instead of just, being the party of opposition and always having to fight against things or fight for these things that matter so much and being super loud about it because our colleagues across the aisle aren't listening.
Thank you. This question comes from social media audience, and the question is, and this will go to you first, Rachel, and that question is, what can be done to make sure that people can afford to actually live in the state of Ohio?
My mind goes to afford to live here, but also want to live here. I think that some of this extremism that's being passed, I've been talking to people in their 20s that are saying that they will not plan to have a family in Ohio if we continue in this way, that they are nervous to have a planned pregnancy in case an emergency happens and they're unable to get health care. More and more people, I have a high schooler, and people are talking about wanting to leave Ohio and go to college and go somewhere else. And it's really unfortunate because I think, I love Ohio, and I think we can be a good place, where people can raise a family, and the people that I live among are just good people. But what's happening in school boards and in state houses is so extreme that it's making for a hostile place to live, I feel. So, but as far as affording to live here, I think we need to look at fair housing. I think we need to look at the state budget and how how we're allocating funds. I think we need to look at things, corruption, and places that our taxpayer dollars are going into people's pockets instead of to us, everyday people working and living in Ohio.
Thank you. This next question is for you. And again, this is another audience question. And that is, violence is on the rise. And if elected, well, again, or if re-elected for you, State Rep Miranda, what will you do to address the issue of, particularly the increasing issue of gun violence?
Yes, absolutely. And I will just reiterate something I said earlier that, myself and Senator Cecil Thomas have started the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus. This is the first of its kind. And it is a bicameral caucus that seeks to change the conversation of what we are doing in terms of gun violence, which is all of the wrong things, in my humble opinion, here in the Ohio State House, and start to work towards the common sense policies that are the right things, because they are those types of policies that have been passed in other states, even states that are more deemed more conservative than ours, and policies that are backed up by data. Right? You could go to Gifford's Law website any day and see the policies that we have on the books here in Ohio, where we're failing, where we could be improving. And one of those is House Bill 262, which is my bill with Representative Bridget Kelly. It's called the Child Access Prevention Tax Credit. Now, when we first introduced this, to require folks that if you're going to have guns in your home, that's fine, that's your right, but make sure that you are safely securing these weapons. And if you don't, and harm is caused with those weapons, then you are going to be held accountable and charged. And this is passed in 27 other states. Ohio is one of the only states that does not have a child access prevention law or a safe storage law on the books. And that is where we should start to fix the ever rising statistics of gun violence, right? Because the reality is that's the number one cause of death for children. 110 children we lose every single day to acts of gun violence. And there is not a day that goes by that I don't open up my Twitter feed and see another child, most of the time under the age of 10, who has gotten a hold of a unsecured weapon in their home and has accidentally either shot themselves or another family member. And this is something we could be preventing. It's something that 27 other states have already prevented and have acted upon, and there's no reason why Ohio shouldn't be next. So it's policies like this that we know work and are backed up by data that I will continue to fight for in the Ohio State House.
Thank you. And finally, the last question that'll go to both, and I'll start with you, Rachel Baker, and that question also from the audience is, Ohio, the way that Ohio funds its education has been ruled unconstitutional. Are you aware of that? First of all, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it was 21-ish years ago it was ruled unconstitutional, and we're still existing under it. So that is probably one of my personal priorities, is to look at funding of public education. I would strongly support the fair school funding plans, and even taking them further to really look and make sure that we're completely and fully funding public education. I would oppose any use of public money being detoured away from public education into other forms of school. I think there's a lot, and in my race in particular, this is a really heated difference between my opponent and me. And I really feel like the point of public education is to educate our next community of citizens, and so parents always have the choice to pull their kid and send them to a private school, to send them to something, to homeschool. But I think that public education needs to serve community and needs to educate our next generation on what we as a community need people to understand, and that our public taxpayer money should pay for that, and should fully and completely fund it, should support teachers, and respect them as the professionals they are, to control curriculum, to know what's best for kids, to be able to create a safe environment where socio emotional learning takes place, and kids feel supported and safe to learn it in public schools. So I'm a big supporter of addressing the unconstitutional funding.
All right, thank you. And that's the same question to you, Representative Miranda.
Thank you. And, just like Rachel said, I think this is one of the biggest areas in which we stand apart from our opponents who are running against us. Not only do I support the Fair School Funding Plan that we passed in House Bill 110, this General Assembly, but I support going to the next step and fully funding fair school funding here in the state of Ohio, because like I mentioned earlier, it has been deemed unconstitutional since before I was born, and that is not fair. That is not fair to our children, our next generation. That is not fair to our educators. It's not fair to our communities, especially when so many of our communities are being taxed to oblivion and asked time and time again for more property taxes for either a bond levy or an operating levy, when the school district is not at fault for that. The state is at fault for that, right? This is a game of tax shifting that the supermajority in the state has been doing for decades, and we must put a stop to that once and for all. And listen, I'm a former school board president, so this is the very reason I ran for the state house, because I said, well, dang it, if they're not going to fix it, I'm going to run, I'm going to flip this seat, and I'm going to get up there and fix it. And we did. We have a bipartisan solution, which is the Fair School Funding Plan. But now we have to make sure that we're fully funding that and that we're addressing all of the disparities in education to make sure no matter what zip code our children live in, they're getting the same quality education, whether it's on this side of 75 or that side of 75. And that is my promise to you, to continue fighting for that in the Ohio State House, because that is originally what I ran for. And, we could go down the rabbit hole and talk about school funding for like 3 hours, but I don't think we have that kind of time tonight. But that's where I stand on the issue. And this is one of the biggest issues, other than reproductive rights, where Rachel and I's opponents stand far apart from us. So thank you for that question.
All right, well, thank you both. And that concludes the question and answer portion of tonight's forum. Now we will give each of you 1 minute to share your closing remarks and appeal to your constituency as to why they should support you over your opponent. And we'll start with you, Ms. Baker.
Sure. Thanks. First, I want to thank you guys for having us and for offering this forum for people to learn about candidates running. I think it's so important that people don't just look at their party, but look at the actual people and vote with their values. I am a mom, a nurse, a child advocate. I've spent my entire career serving others, and want to continue that service in the state house. I think that we need more people with common sense solutions in Columbus and less extremism. And I will be that voice. I will advocate for what's right for our children, for our families, and for workers and everyday Ohioans. So I would greatly appreciate anyone interested can check out my website at voterachelbaker.com. And I am all over social media, links from my website. And I would love votes from the east side of Hamilton County on November 8th.
All right, thank you. And finally, State Rep Miranda.
Yes, thank you, Pastor Tracy Hunter. Thank you, everyone on this call, for having us and for everything you do in this organization. I will just take a second of my closing speech to say that, not enough organizations do this. So thank you for doing this and for putting our values, our views, where we stand on policy on the record, because unfortunately there are so many things that are said that are not backed up by fact, that you all know all too well. But long story short, much like what Rachel said, I'm a mom, I'm a small business owner. I have been serving the Great 28 for 3.5 years, and I'm running to continue to serve you because I believe to the core of my soul, I am not a politician, I'm a public servant, and I am elected to do a job for you, the people of the Great 28 in our region. And I take that very, very seriously, and I work my tail off day in and day out for you, and I want to continue to do so that we can make progress in the Ohio State House and not regress into what this state used to be 150 years ago. So thank you for having us. I appreciate everything you all do. And for more information, visit jessicaforohio.com.
All right. Again, we want to thank both of our candidates this evening, State Representative Jessica Miranda, as well as Rachel Baker, who are both running for, Miranda's running for re-election, Baker's running for election for the first time to the House. And we do want to mention that David Dallas was scheduled to be here. He had actually confirmed and he did not show up tonight. So that's pretty disappointing. He's running for the state Senate. We selectively invited candidates to join us and participate in these forums. And so we do also want to commend our candidates for taking the time. We provide probably a little bit more time than some others because we really are interested in learning who these candidates are, and we want to know what they believe, what they stand for, what they value. And most of all, we want our audience and the Coalition for Just Hamilton County to know who these people are. It's a horrible thing to go to the ballot box and you don't know who you're voting for. So you either don't vote or you just toss it up in the air, and that's not a good way to vote. And so we value the fact that they did take the time to appear tonight. I want to thank the Coalition for Just Hamilton County, who has worked and labored. This was a lot of work putting together these forums for 3 weeks in a row. So I want to thank all of those members of the coalition that have helped to do all of the details that were required in running a successful forum. I want to thank those who participated. Carol Patton, in her absence, she worked extremely hard. She couldn't be here this evening, but she did a lot of work. Jackie Smith, thank you. Dr. Enoch, thank you for handling our technology. Karamia, thank you for being our timekeeper this evening. And Jenny Brown and Barbara Wolf, thank you for being co-moderators tonight with me. And then I want to thank everyone on Facebook who listened and took the time and shared it. And please continue to share it after tonight. It's going to remain on the Coalition for Just Hamilton County Facebook page, and you can share it, and it will be there throughout the election. So again, thank you for that. And for the coalition, we'll see you all on Monday night at 7 p.m. for our normal meeting time. And with that, be blessed. Again, everybody, thanks for joining us. God bless you and have a good evening. Good night.